Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Tuesday Treasure program. Tonight, we are going through a very special collection of objects. They are all related to a very special, what we call Spooktober episode. Spooktober here at the museum is a month-long series of Halloween programs. So we do welcome you in October for our Spooktober episode. As always, my name is Nicole Carpenter. I am the Director of Programs and Education here at the Westport Museum for History and Culture. And as I mentioned, we're going to go through some of the eerier objects that are not normally seen in our collection. So, this evening, I do, as always, welcome you all to this free program. We do appreciate your support. We have a link to our donation page. If you are able, we do appreciate any support that you can give there. And we do, of course, always suggest following and liking our social media platforms. That will notify you for future programs such as this, and it also helps us create programs for all of you. On Facebook and Twitter, you can follow us at Westport History, and on Instagram at Westport History Museum. If at any point during our program tonight you have a question, a comment, an anecdote, or a story that you would like to share with our audience and with me, please do enter that in the comments box, and I will get to as many of those at the end of tonight's program as I can. So, tonight, we are going to jump into our very first object, and I am going to grab that so that you all can see. I am not wearing my normal gloves tonight because we are handling all paper objects, and it's actually best for me to use my hands so that I can have very good control. So this first object is probably the most somber object that we're going to take a look at tonight. This is a letter. The author of this letter is unknown because the second half of it is actually lost. We do hope that the family that donated this letter does find the second half of the letter someday and will return it to its proper place. But for now, it is an incomplete letter, so we do not know who wrote it. We do know from the contents of the letter that it is written by a man. He speaks about his wife, and he also signs his letter to "My dear uncle." We also know that the letter is from Paris. It is actually signed at the top, Paris, February 4th, 1837. The reason I wanted to show you this item tonight is that it discusses an event that happens that many of us are probably familiar with this day and age, especially with the pandemic. This letter actually speaks about a funeral procession that the author witnesses while in France. At the beginning of this letter, the author talks about being in France and how, in his opinion, France is falling behind other European countries and even the United States. And he talks about how, unfortunately, the country finds itself without resources oftentimes. And he expresses to his uncle in very sad terms that there are many suicides in the country at the time. And because of this, he sees many funeral processions. And within the letter, he actually quotes his wife's journal and her description of a funeral passing in France. And I thought I would read just this short description to you that appears in the letter. The hearse drove up, accompanied by 2 mourning carriages. The hearse was black with white fringed curtains and white horses. The coffin was placed in it, covered with a white pall, and on the coffin was afterwards placed a black velvet cushion with a silver wreath of flowers upon it, to signify that the person was a young unmarried woman. The drivers of the hearse and mourning carriages were draped in deep black, with white knee bands about 6 inches wide and cocked hats. Half an hour after the departure, the paraphernalia about the doorway was taken down, and no traces remained that death had been busy there. Now again, this is a bit more of a somber object than some of the others we'll take a look at this evening, but it is an interesting object, and it gives us a brief glimpse into one man's experience of a funeral procession in Paris, which would have been very different from a funeral practice back in the United States. The second object I wanted to present to you all tonight is this object that I just revealed underneath the letter. Now, this is a red kind of bound book. It is very thin, and if you all can see the words on the front of this book, it is printed poison register. Now, this book is exactly what the cover says it is. It is a register book for poisons. Now, this book belonged to William Edgar Nash, and it is from the early 20th century. And it actually, the first entry in this book is put in 1881. Now, druggists would use a book like this because they were required by law to keep track of any poisonous substances that they sold to the public. Most of the poisons in this book were used as pesticides or cleaning agents for disinfectant, things like that in private homes. And what this book does is it lists not only the individual, but also the chemical that they bought and the amount that they bought, and also where they lived. It's really very, very interesting for us in our research because we can see who is coming to the store and what they're buying. Now, I will tell you that, to our knowledge, no one that bought poison in this book has ever shown any evidence of using it for anything other than a pesticide or a cleaning agent. There are, of course, many, many other cases across the world and across our country of poisons being used for less beneficial reasons. The substances that appear in this book commonly are cyanide, arsenic, or strychnine, and they are, again, recorded with the individual's name. They're also recorded with the amount. Now, most of the time, you would think in a private home, these chemicals were being bought in very, very small quantities. And in most cases, that is true. Many of them are a few grams to a couple of ounces. But there are some entries that are actually buying pounds of some of these chemicals and some of these substances. Again, most of Westport in the 1880s and the early 1900s are farmers. So we do believe that, and we do see that many of these names belong to known Westport farmers. So we do believe that's what they're using their substances for. We also see that Nash's store is serving not only Westporters, but other local towns. Weston, Wilton, Norwalk, and Easton are all recorded in this book. But there are some entries that are from further away. There's an entry for Brooklyn, New York, and probably the most curious location that someone is listed from being from is Texas. It is a very curious entry, and I would love to know more about this individual, but it does seem that people came and bought from this store from quite a ways away. The last printed or book that I'd like to show you this evening is this brown book here. It does have the title on the front. This book is called The Art and Practice of Embalming. And it's by F.A. Sullivan, who was a lecturer and demonstrator of embalming techniques. Now, the reason that this book is being shown this evening is because it has a direct connection to Westport, as all of our objects do. But this company that published this book was the Embalmer Supply Company, or ESCO. That's what I will refer to them as. Now, ESCO was established in 1886 by C.B. Dolge and Max Hunk. Both of them were German-born inventors, and Hunk was also a pharmacist. Now, they created the Embalmer Supply Company to fill a demand. there was a very high demand for embalmers and also embalming fluid, which is what they started their company as, beginning in the Civil War. Their formaldehyde that they created, which is what this bottle in the front is, of course. This is an Esco formaldehyde bottle, probably from about 1907. There was a high demand just after the Civil War because there were, of course, so many bodies. And by the 1880s, when Esco is established, embalming and that treatment of a corpse is in very, very high demand. We know that by 1890, the company has moved to Westport, Connecticut. We also know that the partnership between Mr. Hunk and Mr. Dolge is dissolved in 1893, and the company becomes Esco formally. When the embalmer's fluid is first used, it actually contains arsenic, one of the substances that would have appeared in the register book. And there are many problems that still occur with arsenic formaldehyde graves even today. There are Civil War graves that actually poison cemetery yards and the water that runs through them even today. It's still an ongoing problem. But Esco, along with producing the fluid, produced mechanical pieces to be used during the embalming procedure. And one figure in our book, I will find the entry here. One drawing that appears in this book actually advertises one of Esco's mechanical pieces that they sell. This book was a manual on how to embalm, but it was also a very, very clever marketing tool that they used to sell their equipment. So this picture here is a piece of equipment that Esco sells, and it is actually used, and I have a very interesting quote to read to you. This is called an ampliphone, and it was used to make sure that whoever they were embalming was indeed departed. There's a lovely line that I will read to you here, and it says, "If life is not extinct, this instrument will, in most cases, receive the pulsation of the heart." I do love the qualification on that line that says, "in most cases." But again, this is a book that was produced by the company Esco, not only to increase the knowledge of the embalmers who were using their supplies, but also maybe to advertise some of their other tools and hopefully increase their own sales. Today, Esco no longer sells machinery or tools for embalmers, but it is purely a chemical company. The bottle, I also wanted to point out one other thing. This comes later in the 20th century, and we know that because the formaldehyde that is sold in this bottle is actually advertised as being arsenic-free, and it wasn't until the early 1900s that arsenic no longer appeared in formaldehyde. But one of the most striking things on this bottle is the advertisement on the front actually claims that their formaldehyde promise their customers a lifelike complexion. It's a bit of a macabre thing to think about the book and the bottle together and how they would have been marketing these products. But it was something that was very desirable to their clients. The thought of having a person at a funeral look like they may have only departed very recently. The final object that I'd like to show you tonight is this beautiful piece over here on the side. This is a illustration done by Robert Lambden. I want to tell you a little bit about Robert Lambden before I talk about the object itself. So Robert Lambden was born in 1886 in Kansas. He grew up in Denver, Colorado, And there he attended the Henry Reed School of Fine Arts, where he studied drawing. He also worked for a couple of newspapers there, where he was mandated for every news story to complete a drawing. And he completed a drawing almost every day for them to accompany different newspaper articles. By 1911, Robert had married Lillian Peters, and eventually the couple made their way to first New York City in 1917, where Lambden worked as a freelance illustrator for magazines and for other commercial companies. And the year after, they moved to New Jersey first and then ended up in Westport. And from that time on, they resided here. He was very active in the community and community matters. He served as director and archives chairman for the Westport Weston Arts Council, and he was also known nationally. He was a National Society of Mural Painters member, as well as the Society for Illustrators. And throughout his career, he went on to paint many beautiful murals. There was actually one at Bedford Middle School. And he worked for a variety of magazines and also wrote or illustrated some juvenile books as well. Now, this piece tonight is entitled, if you can see the title down there on the bottom, it is titled Halloween, very fittingly. This is a black ink illustration. The white areas that you see is purely negative space. It does, looking at very, very closely at the illustration, it does appear to have been drawn first. And on the piece, there are a couple of figures that are just really fabulous, and they're a fun thing to kind of end our Spooktober episode on. There are figures over here on this far side that resemble something like a witch with a very, very large hat. There's also a goblin kind of perched on her hat. And then there are three smaller figures that might be imps or some kind of goblin or troll or something. There are also two black owls up in the top corner here, just in front of this full moon. And then, of course, down at the bottom, there is the beautiful black cat creeping towards a candle. Now, one thing that's very interesting about this object, and of course is not seen very often, only when this object is actually taken out of storage for a program like this or for exhibition, is the back visible. Now, this drawing is in a fragile state, so I will leave it facing forward, but I will tell you on the back, there is a very, very faint pencil sketch of a layout, an alternative layout that Lambden considered. And that layout has the black kind of rectangle that this drawing shows, but it's a bit different. It has some different figures in the middle, but most notably around the edges there are additional characters kind of creeping around the sides and interrupting this black space, almost like the cat is, but a bit more direct into the drawing. It's a wonderful little snapshot of the artist's process and thinking out the layout of this piece, this very, very fun seasonal piece. So, if there are any questions, I am happy, more than happy to answer those. If you don't have any questions at this moment, don't hesitate to put a question or a comment down below after our live recording. We are always monitoring these videos for new questions, and we will either answer you in the comments or get back to you with an email. My team and I are always more than happy to answer your questions. We do have a question for you all. Which item was your favorite? If you would like to comment which one was your favorite, we would love to know. It's always a really fun thing to see what everyone enjoyed. I actually have a poll here in our video. I have the 4 objects that we looked at. If you liked the bottle best, you can vote for the book as well. That is a great choice. So we always like to know who enjoyed which objects. We do have a couple of comments over here on the side. So we have one that says, do you think Lincoln's embalming influenced the increased desire of people to have their loved ones embalmed? That's an interesting question. So they're referring to President Lincoln, and he was embalmed. I don't know how directly that would have influenced the major population, but the Civil War and also the same period of time when Lincoln is, of course, assassinated and embalmed, that is when we see embalming as a common practice. That's when we really see it become so popular. It may have had a hand in it. I don't know how directly connected it is, but it is an interesting question. It's definitely, I would say, probably related. There are definitely links between presidential funerals and different kind of major events. The same way that a royal wedding is very impactful on society, a president's funeral, their inauguration, other events that are directly tied to them are very, very influential on the society that they're standing for. It's a very interesting question. If anyone does know more about that or is curious about that, I will look into it and see if I can find a little bit more about that. That's an interesting idea. For the rest of Spooktober, we do, of course, encourage you to join us for the rest of our programs. Next week, we have a live reading on the lawn of the Museum of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with none other than the author himself, Washington Irving, back from the grave. We also, 2 weeks from tonight, are going to be joined by other local history museums and organizations who are going to show one of their Halloween objects. So we will continue to look at some of the eerie objects throughout our local communities, and we will have another special object to show you as well. So tune in for that. The big shout out that I would say at the very end of our program this evening is for Halloween itself. We, the museum, are hosting our annual lantern tour. It can't be done in person this year, but we are holding it virtually online. Tickets are on sale on our website, and this year you can go through not one tour, but 3 online with an access code with your ticket. So we do encourage you to join us for that program. I hope you all enjoyed our items tonight. Again, feel free to vote on our poll for your favorite object if you had one. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you will join me in 2 weeks when we see the rest of the objects. So have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.